Well, hello and good afternoon. Welcome to Tara's third Thursday webinar. Um, Typically, as we always do, we're going to wait a couple of minutes just to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to log in. We've got a lot of people that are going to be joining us this afternoon, and I know folks are kind of finishing up calls or having some troubles with the technology because we all have to be experts in multiple different online software packages now, from Google Meets to webinar, GoToWebinar to Zoom. I'm using 2 or 3 of them a day. I'm sure you are too. So we're going to give everybody just a couple of minutes to get logged in, and then we'll get started. So please just be patient with us and hang tight. All right, we still have more people joining us, which is fantastic. Hello and welcome. We're going to be just taking the first couple of minutes this afternoon to allow everybody to log in. We got a lot of people that are going to be joining us today, making sure that those with technology issues or finishing up a previous phone call have an opportunity to jump in before we get started. So for those of you that are on time, thank you very much. If you just be patient just for another minute or so, we'll get started probably in about 60 seconds. So just hang tight. All right, just about another 30 seconds or so, folks. We're going to get started. Again, we're just waiting for the last few stragglers to join us before we get started. Of course, this is going to be recorded, so you'll be able to watch it and share it with other teammates later. But those that want to participate live, we're going to give them just another few seconds to join us. All right. Well, according to my official timepiece, Chris, we are at 2:02, so we're going to get this party started. So again, thank you all, those who have been here on time and those who are still joining us for being part of this Tara Third Thursday webinar series. We've been doing this now, I believe this is our 16th event, and this is the second time that we're going to have our friends from the Vested Group being hosts. So we're really excited about that. For those that are used to joining these sessions, you kind of know how these go. But if this is your first time, these are 45-minute webinars, very quick. We try to keep them high level and informative. The first couple of minutes here is just kind of myself, Stephen Napoli, the President and CEO of Tara, giving an update as to just a couple of things that are happening in the world of Tara, and then I pass it off to our host for the majority of the presentation to talk about for 25 to 30 minutes about the subject matter that they'll be covering, and then a couple of minutes that we leave at the end for some Q&A. You'll note that in your control panel, you've got a couple of options for questions and for chat. So use either of them. If during the remarks today, if you've got a question for one of us, just put it in there, and then if time allows at the end, I'll ask some questions on behalf of everybody. So today we're going to be, and we're very pleased to be, welcoming Chris Johnson with the Vested Group as our host. And before I kind of flip things over to him, I'm just going to now have a couple announcements to read here about Tara. The first is, for those that have been watching these last couple of months and been seeing some of the message that we've been sending out to our members, today is our last day if you want to participate in the 50% discount to the 2022 Electronics Reuse Conference in Denver on November 13th through 16th. So through your membership with us, we were able to negotiate a deal. We're going to be a partial sponsor of the event, and just through 5 o'clock today, you have to register at 50% off. After that, we'll be sending out a new promo code for just $50 off for that registration. After I'm kind of completed my remarks here, I'm going to put the link information in the chat feature so everybody can see that. The second bit of news is, in addition to these Third Thursday monthly webinars that we do, we've been trying to put together some more interactive options for our members to get, so you all can talk amongst yourselves. And the first of those efforts, we were hoping to get launched last month, but had to postpone a little bit. It will be the first after the 4th of July, hopefully the first week or so in July, where we have some marketing folks that are part of our network that are going to be involved in just kind of a conversation, kind of a think tank, where we want to invite our members that have marketing questions or want to learn a little bit more about best practices in marketing their business, or find out a little bit more about some of the conferences people are going to and why and what's working for them. We're going to have a session on that, and that's going to be hosted by Wally Greaves with C2 and Daniel Spalding with Battery Solutions, both part of our Certified Recycler membership panel. But as I mentioned, we've got 45 minutes to do this. The clock is already ticking, so I'm going to get started here. As I mentioned, we're very pleased to have Chris Johnson with the Vested Group to be our host today. Just want a couple things to say about Chris before I turn it over to him. Just as an introduction, he is the Director of Strategy over at the Vested Group. He has more than 25 years in this rapidly evolving ERP space, and he expertly guides his clients through the process of evaluating where they are and kind of where they're going, and helps them definitely build a roadmap to success. So he is part of the Vested Group. The Vested Group is one of two of Terra's exclusive allied members for ERP solutions. They're an award-winning NetSuite solution provider specializing in consulting, implementation, support, and development of a full range of NetSuite products. The Vested Group understands how the complex e-waste industry can be, so they've created solutions specifically to the idea industry that they call revested. I know he's got some exciting details and information to share with you guys about where this industry is heading. So I'm going to turn the presentation over to Chris. Thank you, Chris.
All right, thanks, Stephen. Appreciate that. I heard expert and deft. That you made that up. That wasn't mine. So, but thank you. So, guys, thank you. I left the camera on just for a moment because I'm always shocked when I hear somebody's voice and then later I meet them and they never look like what I expect. So I just kind of left it on for a minute just so maybe you can see me at a conference and come visit with me. But I'm really going to kind of dive into our, I was hoping I could shut this off actually. I've also noticed that I have neglected to shut down on my notifications, so you guys will get to see my emails. They pop up, so that should be fun. But today we are going to cover stats, outlook, and trends for electronics recycling. This is kind of a fun little topic just because it's, Steve, you may have to help me figure out how to get rid of this window.
Well, I just see yourself in our presentation.
Oh, well, I'm trying to get rid of myself.
Well, you should have under your sharing tab, you should have the thing that just looks like a video camera. If you'd like to turn off your video, just the little video camera icon, just click it. Should be green.
Boom, thank you. Okay, so thank you for that. So this is kind of a fun topic because it's, where's the industry going with statistics? What's some of the kind of the background information that drives the industry? So we'll look at what the performance has been, some of the big impacts of the industry in the last few years. What are the key external drivers of the industry? And these are going to be statistical. So there's going to be some raw numbers that we're going to look at. And I'm kind of a numbers dork or a numbers geek. So I like looking through data sets for some reason. But it's so you may get more of this than you want, or you may not get enough. And if you don't get enough, I'm going to show you where to go find more. So we'll look at where the industry's going. So I'm using some analyst reports. We'll look at that in a little bit to understand, what's driving the industry, what's been happening with those drivers, and what's going to push the industry forward. And then we'll look at key success factors. So what are the main things that you should focus on, given what we've learned about the performance and the outlook? So what are the main things you should focus on to understand? Are you ready to kind of move along with the industry? Are you ready to grow? And then we'll look at basically understanding, are you ready for growth, and how do you do that? So as Stephen mentioned, I'm a director of strategy for the Vested Group. My responsibilities are one around industry targeting. The Vested Group is a software implementer. We implement NetSuite ERP. And we implement in, I think, 14 different industries. Electronics recycling, we probably put it our top 1 or 2 industries that we work in. One, because we love the industry. 2, because it was our very first customer way back in 2012. So we've been involved in this industry for a long time. We write white papers about the industry. We have developed a documentary about the industry. You may have seen it. If you haven't, I'll give you an opportunity I'll show you how to find it. But it's just a positive outlook about the industry and the people in the industry, and really, kind of the positive social impact that they're having. So I can show you how to find that. So as part of my targeting responsibility, I help us figure out where do we want to direct our resources. So that may be marketing efforts, it may be development, that kind of thing. I'm also a solution architect, so I am responsible for designing or defining a given solution for a customer, and I'm an alliances manager. So in the NetSuite space, there's a large number of third-party developers that may fill in a specialized gap. So it may be AP automation or AR automation or something like that. And I understand kind of all the partners that are out there and who's the best partner for a given solution. So hopefully have an end-to-end view of the solution. Vesta Group, NetSuite ERP, we're a 5-star partner for NetSuite, which is the highest designation. NetSuite itself is a very flexible ERP and a development platform. And as I mentioned, our first client way back over 10 years ago was an electronics recycler in Oklahoma City. And we developed IP for them, so intellectual property that's built in NetSuite that allows us to take what's typically a forward logistics industry or ERP and make it reverse logistics for electronics and cell phone recycling, so that it's all integrated, all works. Financials are part of it, port builders, end-to-end functionality in a single system. I'm not going to talk about that a lot. Just to kind of want to intro that as a way of who are we and where are we going and why are we qualified to speak in the industry. I've got a couple of sources that I'm going to use today. One is from an industry analyst site called IBISWorld. I've got a couple of reports with a February 2022 update that I put that out there on purpose because there have been some significant things that have happened since February. So as we go through this and kind of understand, what did the world look like in February, there's a couple of things that have happened that make the world look a little bit different today, and so we need to talk through that as well. And of course, we've got 22 customers in this space, so we have implemented and support daily 22 customers in electronics and cell phone recycling. So we're borrowing on that experience, surveying our customers, talking to our customers, and of course, any relationship advisory that we have. It's friends in the industry, people that advise us. And so that's where all the sources for today's discussion are coming from. All right, let's jump into it. So how are we doing? So the electronics recycling industry is at 18.7 billion in revenue. Over the last 5 years, it's averaged 5.4% annual growth. I've got the little graph on the side to highlight something very significant, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And then the industry, and keep in mind these are industry numbers, are averaging 7.2% of profit margin. So because it's an average, some people are averaging 0 and some are averaging 14. So this is that's an average across the industry. So we'll talk about where's revenue going, what's going to drive revenue for the industry over the next few years, where's profit margin going, and what's going to drive those things. So we'll hit that in the next few minutes. But one thing I want to highlight here is notice as I go through the years in 2014 and 15 and work my way to 2022, that there's a significant drop. You recognize that as COVID, obviously. You guys all felt the impact of COVID. It was very painful. People quit buying things. Companies quit engaging in risk. So they looked at making any major changes, at making any significant purchases. People basically pulled back their capital. and they pulled back their assets, and they didn't hire because there's no way to get people to your location because we're all at home. So the industry obviously took a significant drop. But the interesting thing that happened after that is that there's a significant bounce back. And notice that bounce back was higher than the prior average. So one of the unique or interesting things about this industry is it relies heavily on the aging of electronic stock that's out there. So as COVID happened and people's electronics started to age, they really felt the tightening of the technology is moving forward, but I can't participate in the new technology. So the bounce back, once we started to recover from COVID, people were excited about catching up to the technology. So one thing that I've kind of learned through this is I was looking through the statistics and I've talked to different people, is there's a belief that because technology constantly moves forward and anything that's external, like a recession, or like COVID or inflation has hit us right now, that's what we're engaged in right now, that the technology moves forward, but people stay in the same place or they move backward a little bit. And then once that thing ends, so once COVID ended, there's a big bounce back that happens afterwards. So one of the kind of learnings I've got about this is when we go through and experience something that pulls our industry back for a little bit, it's going to come back. Just because technology is always pulling people forward, and they get excited about the new thing. So that's something to keep in mind. So notice, so this is an industry report from Ibis World. It's a lot of stats, a lot of data. I mentioned I'm kind of a nerd about that. This little download thing actually allowed me to download the stats, and I got to play with it in Excel. It's fun. But notice as our revenue growth from 2013 or so is 9.5 million. I'm at 18.6 million. So in a very short time, the revenue growth for the industry doubled. Now, obviously that coincides with cell phone releases, smartphone release, how quickly people change out smartphones, how quickly they're changing out tablets. It highly correlates with that. But one thing I thought was kind of interesting is that if you look across and see the number of establishments and the number of enterprises, it changed, but not a huge amount. And you may look at that and think that's kind of counterintuitive, right? As my industry revenue increases, I would expect that to attract a lot of new players, and that is true. There are not a lot of new players that are in that number. What's also in that number, because it's a sum, is a lot of exits and a lot of consolidations. So as we look at the number of enterprises, it's not a huge change over the last 10 years. But what happens underneath the covers, what's happening underneath that surface, is there's a lot of movement back and forth between new entrants, people leaving, and consolidations. So that was kind of interesting. Employment's increased some, and you kind of wonder, well, if I've got all these new players or people exiting, why wouldn't my employment go up? Or if I doubled my revenue in 10 years, wouldn't I expect my employment to double? Well, that's on the surface, that's true. But what's happened in the industry is, as the industry has matured and grown, there's new technology that's made people more productive, that's made more companies productive. And so, in fact, one of the things that we'll find as we get into the what makes my company successful, it's the adoption of technology, getting away from paper, getting away from spreadsheets, having technology, built into my business processes that allows me to have fewer employees or need fewer employees, but do more and produce more. So let's look at stats that drive the industry.
Hey, Chris?
Yeah, jump
Real
in.
quick on that previous slide there, was that global revenue or is that US?
Great question. This is the United States.
Okay.
I should have highlighted that first two letters right there.
There you go.
So thank you for that. Yeah, and you're welcome to ask questions. And if you see something in the chat, let me know.
Will do.
So what stats drive the industry? I picked stats specifically. We'll talk about things like regulation separately as a part of this. Regulation drives stats. So we're going to look at stats. So the top four things that correlate highly with revenue and margin is demand from computer and electronic product manufacturing. So that doesn't mean that they're buying your product or sourcing or a source of your product. It just means that it correlates with it. So as product manufacturing goes up, electronic product manufacturing goes up, so does electronics recycling. As it goes down, so does electronics recycling. World price of copper is a big one. Number of mobile internet connections. There's an interesting stat around that we'll look at in just a second. And of course, the world price of aluminum. So you guys know how much copper and aluminum are in the product, and can see that those two things would drive a lot of two things: the revenue and the margin. So I've included. I know, I mentioned I'm kind of a stats nerd, so I've included a little link in here to the FRED. So the FRED is the Federal Reserve economic data. To me, this is a fascinating place of lots and lots of data. If you're wondering, so tell me about the cellular connections. What's going on with that? I think it actually said mobile connections, but we'll get it right. Mobile cellular subscriptions in the United States. So you can query in here, and this is free. So anybody can sign up for a FRED account, takes less than a minute. And now you can go look up all the Federal Reserve data about the economy. So if you're looking at metals pricing, what's happened with it? Where do we think it's going to go? If you're looking at cell phone subscriptions, if you're looking at producer price indexes for electronics manufacturing, what are the prices of the electronics manufacturing? Is that going up or going down? This is an interesting place to look, because what you can do from your perspective is say, hey, I know that these 4 things drive my industry, and they are in general going to drive my business at a high level, not at a detail level, but at a high level. But you can come back and look at these and say, so what's going on with those 4 things? As I look across, I've got a long viewpoint. This is from the 60s, right? Not a lot of electronics manufacturing back then, but I can drag this into, let's just get 2015. So I can drag that little slider on the bottom for 2015. And now I can see what's going on with mobile cellular subscriptions in the US, according to the Bureau of Labor Services that collects all these stats. And I can see per 100 people, so number per 100 people. In 2015, I had 120, so that's basically 1.2 mobile subscriptions per person in the US. Went up a little bit into 2017 and then suddenly dropped. Basically started a new baseline into 2020. So it was increasing over a significant period, and now it's dropped. Now this is one of the drivers or one of the things that correlates highly with the movement of the industry. So if the numbers of cell phone subscriptions or cellular subscriptions drop, that should give you an idea that maybe things are not going to be as great as they were in the past. So as we look through this, you're going to kind of get an idea, according to the FRED, what some of the background data looks like. So I thought this one was interesting. The producer price index, if I could type. Electronic equipment is what I'm looking for. There we go. So by industry, electronic equipment manufacturing. So remember, this was electronic equipment manufacturing was one of the drivers of the industry. If I want to see what's going on with them, that starts in 2004. I'm going to drag this up to 2018. Well, that's gone up significantly. Even in the last few months, it's gone up. And drag it up again. So I kind of asked myself, what's driving prices to go up significantly? How does that, to understand what my outlook for my industry is going to look like, I can come here and kind of look and see, hey, I see producer prices are going up. I can see metals pricing is going up or down. So this is kind of an interesting place. The other thing that you can do with this is, instead of coming here every month and just looking at data, you can actually have it emailed to you. So you can get a little report once a month with those 4 stats that tells you this is where things are going, or once a quarter, or however frequently you want. So if you're doing annual planning or something like that, this is a good way to get some data for you, kind of moving forward.
The good visualization too of some of the supply chain issues that the industry is seeing, that those costs going up so rapidly.
Oh, yeah, great point. Great point. So so St. Louis, fred.stlouisfed.org. You can also just look it up, Fred and Federal Reserve economic data, and you'll go to it. And again,
I'll put that in the chat for everybody if you want to go pick that up.
Cool, thank you. So what are the things that help and hurt our industry for electronics recycling? So the things that help, one is obviously life cycle growth. So the industry, as it matures, is increasing its use of technology. As it increases its use of technology, its ability to produce more units, in the sense that I need fewer people to have more production, it goes up. So my cost goes down. The industry has low capital intensity compared to most. That means you don't need giant machines. You don't need giant assets. You're not having to make huge investments to enter into the industry. So that helps the industry. Once you're in, that doesn't help you because you're in, you've already made the investment. But for the industry itself, it helps at low capital intensity. That allows a lot of new players to come in. It actually increases your competition. And then in this industry, there's a low concentration of organizations. So what that means is that there are 2, 3 very, very large players. Those players only make up a tiny fraction of the total volume of the industry. It's like 3%. So the SIMs, the ERIs, those kind of guys make up a very small percent of that 18.7 billion. What that does is it means that if I'm not that size, that there's a lot of opportunity for me out there. Mm-hmm. So having that low concentration of organizations creates opportunity for lots and lots of people so that they can expand. The thing that's hurt the industry is revenue volatility. So we saw what happened during COVID. We can see significant changes in producer price indexes, in cell phone subscriptions. So we can see that those things that correlate highly with the industry are making changes to my revenue. The issue there is that it's hard to attract new capital when revenue is volatile, right? Because if revenue is volatile, there's a lot of risk. And it's hard to attract investors. It's hard for people who are in the industry to want to risk a lot of additional money or additional investment in the industry when it's difficult to see their way forward, or believe that things are so volatile, I don't know when the right time to get in is. So that hurts the industry. There are increasing barriers to entry. So that is typically in the form of certifications, regulatory environment, because so many other companies are investing in technology. Well, if I want to get into the industry, I have to make that investment as well. So there's more barriers to entry for new players, for new entrants. And then increasing regulation and policy. So as the state of California or New York, contemplate increasing their what do they have, like a 50% requirement to recycle their electronics, or they have to recycle 50% of their electronics. As they contemplate increasing that number, they create new regulation that makes it more difficult for companies that are getting into the industry. It also creates new revenue opportunities. So that one, regulation policy, is almost kind of like a double-edged sword, right? So if I'm a company in California and I'm required to recycle 50% of my electronics today, and in a year I have to recycle 70% of my electronics, well, that increases a lot of sources into the waste stream, right? And so that I've got more opportunities to find new sources. So as California, as New York, as other states are adopting these policies, well, there's new stream, there's new opportunities for me out there to find sources, to be able to find product, to be able to convert and then sell it. So that one is kind of a double-edged sword.
And there was a question came in there about the life cycle growth, about how that helps.
Yeah, so maybe the viewpoint is that I guess the life cycle growth as the industry grows. So we saw it double in size. Capital or growth revenue, margin, that attracts capital. And so what that means is that companies that are looking at investing in an industry like the Vesta Group, we see opportunities in the industry because we think that the growth and the margin opportunities are there. As the individual companies in the industry grow, well, that creates opportunity for us. And so we're willing to go invest in development, in training, in our infrastructure to be able to support players in the industry so that they can get better at what they do. So there's a lot of people like us out there, whether it's a software company or it's a company that's a hardware company, or they help with processing, or they do training, or they're basically willing to invest in their product to make the industry better. So lifecycle, as the industry grows and matures, it attracts capital to it, and it attracts people that have something positive to bring to the industry to it. I hope that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so where's the industry going? All right, so what we're looking at, this little graph here is 2022 to 2027, and it is the percent margin growth. So it's expected that margin will continue to grow, but the rate that it's growing will decline a little bit. So it's expected to bump up a little bit, but the rate of growth will decline over time. And that's pretty common in maturing industries. So this is a six years of margin outlook. The industry is not terribly old by itself. This probably represents a quarter of the age of the industry. So revenue is expected to increase, margins expected to increase, but the rate of growth of margins not expected. It's expected to go down a little bit. So a few things to note. There is expected to be a continued COVID bounce back. Consumers are replacing their old models. So as the technology moved forward, people that got antsy, right? So they didn't have the money, the free capital to go purchase product, but they had the desire to have the new product. So that created additional demand, or a bounce back, as COVID went away. And so that's expected to continue, but not at the pace that it was at. And then, of course, there's a general demand for growth as demand continues to grow over time, as there's more and more users, more and more population, manufacturing increases, that drives the commodities pricing to increase over time. But we know that in the last few months, inflation has hit 40-year high, 40-plus-year high, and that'll temporarily lower per capita spending. So people are feeling a pinch. You're probably, and this is not based on an analyst report, this is an opinion, you're probably going to see a slower growth this year because of inflation. Just people are not going to replace things. They're not going to spend the money. I don't know that it's going to be like COVID, because that was maybe once in a lifetime for us. But per capita spending is definitely going down, and you may see a temporary lowering. Now remember, there's a bounce back. So as you're watching that FRED data and you're watching per capita spending go down, at some point there'll be a turnaround. That number will start to go up. And I think that we can learn from what's happened in the past, from COVID, other inflation, other recession cycles. You see that bounce back as it relates to electronics manufacturing. So that bounce back is something that you can look forward to because the electronic stock constantly ages. And people constantly have that, but the technology doesn't age. The technology gets more and more advanced quicker and quicker, so that cycle between new releases increases. The amount of functionality that comes with the new release increases, and people kind of get that itch to buy the new thing. So there's a bounce back.
I think also what maybe helped the industry a bit was, during COVID and afterwards, was that the idea that for a lot of folks, things got very quiet and they started investing in themselves. They retained their employees even though they weren't as busy as they were. They started looking at their systems and processes, how they could be improved, because they had the time to take a look at what they had been doing and to look at areas that could be improved. So, if the industry is smart like it was during COVID, any kind of lull is just an opportunity to kind of take a harder look at kind of what you're doing. Make sure you've got the right technology and investments in place to capitalize when things bounce back.
Yeah, basically prep yourself because it's going to come back. According to the analysts, they're expecting increased consolidation as larger companies acquire smaller companies. So as there's more maturity, it attracts more capital into the industry. The larger companies want to expand geographic presence, and there's a reason for that, which I'll get into in a second. But they want to grow from being a local company to being 2 states to being 5 states. They want to add locations that allows them to increase their technological advantage. The ones that have a technology advantage are the ones that grow the fastest. And as regulations tighten on the manufacturer, they look out, they want to find, remember the manufacturers are large, they want to find large recyclers as partners. A given company, large company, doesn't want to work with 1,000 small companies or 100 small companies. They want to look at somebody, they want some consistency, and they want a single set of policies and a single process instead of having to work with 100 different processes. So as you see, like the state of California, if you want to look at them as a bellwether, and they increase their recycling requirement from 50% to 70%, and that drives these manufacturers to go look for partners. And these manufacturers are national and global. They're going to be looking for partners that are national and global. So they're going to seek out large recyclers as partners. So you're going to see more consolidation as mid-sized companies start to buy small companies to increase their geographic presence, to be able to work with larger manufacturers. The expectation on margin is that there's going to be continued revenue and pricing growth. So your revenue will grow, but there's also going to be increased labor costs. And you're probably feeling that right now. It's hard to find people, and that's going to slow your margin growth. So the expectation over the next 5 years is that margin will grow, but it won't feel like a lot. So it was in 2022, it's expected to be 7.2%. And here we're looking at, in over 5 years, your average margin for the industry will be 7.5%. And that's, again, largely driven by labor cost. We're expecting tightening regulations. So more and more cities and states are seeing the requirement or the desire to keep things out of landfills to lower their risk. Cities are putting more and more landfill restrictions. That's going to increase the amount of product that enters into the recycling waste stream and away from landfills. And I've got rising metal prices, maybe. Remember this report's from February. Yeah. So the reason the metals prices, or they predicted prices would rise, is because of growth of manufacturing and growth of use of aluminum and copper in construction and in other reasons. As we see emerging economies, they're investing in more. So smaller economies, other countries have more money than they've had in the past. And so they've been investing in manufacturing and infrastructure more, which they're buying the commodity, which is driving up prices. There's a small expectation for a continued economic recovery from COVID, but inflation's killing it all, certainly in the US and in Europe. Inflation might cause us to roll back into a recession. But if that does happen, as Stephen mentioned, that's a good time to sit back and plan for the next round, for that bounce back. So knowing that there might be rising metal prices, the thing that I would recommend is to go check the Fred. That's a good place to sign up, to get emails to tell me what's going on with metals prices, so I understand where's the whole industry going. Okay. All right, so key success factors. So again, going back to IBIS World and the industry analysts, they've got 3 primary things. One, of course, is access to source. I mean, we all know that. So access to extensive distribution collection network, local patronage. It's companies like Electrobac in Toronto that have developed a recycling bin, and they've got 100 recycling bins around Toronto. And so they're basically getting free supply. But they've got an agreement with companies to allow the company to allow their employees to come and drop electronics in their bins. How you be successful: comply with regulations and get certification. I think, if you talk to R2 or e-stewards, they're going to tell you, of course, you have to be certified. As we talk to customers, they're either working on their certification or they have it, and they feel like they have to have it so that they can appeal to larger companies. And then, of course, access to
an area that we're seeing a lot here is people questioning certification. And that's understandable. A lot of changes have happened to both the e-stewards and the R2 standard here in the last couple of years, especially R2. I know some folks are feeling very frustrated with that, and are looking at, well, do I still need to maintain my certification? I'm not going to change my business practices. Is that good enough? But I think as you pointed out in a couple slides before, where there's a low barrier to entry into this space, unless you do things like get certified. It's kind of a way to insulate your business to a certain extent against competition, and to be competitive is to make sure that you've got that. And just curious to hear if those that you're working with, what their impression of their certification is.
Yeah, so when we talk to our customers, they go back to, they'll receive RFPs from their sources, so hospital systems or commercial entities. And what those companies are struggling with is they have a hard time differentiating between processors, between ITAD processors, between recyclers, because they don't know enough about what happens to the product once it leaves their facility. Some do, some are great at it, but a lot of them, as they're seeing the need to recycle, or that message about recycling gets out, and they suddenly get the bug that, hey, we need to start doing this. Like even education systems, it's just not their top priority, but it is important to them. They want to get started, and they just don't know enough. So they're having a hard time distinguishing between competitors to understand who is the best one. So a lot of them are going on price. Who can I get the best deal from? So they struggle, and then of course that's going to drive margin, issues. So price is not the place to compete. We don't want to drive to the bottom, the lowest one to drive the whole industry to the bottom. So ideally, lowering risk, focusing on productivity is where companies are trying to go. They're trying to distinguish themselves.
And fortunately, being thoughtful enough to invest in an organization that's looking to promote the idea that certification matters to the industry. So to all of our members, we thank you for helping us do that.
Yeah, the other area that you might consider here is that large companies, the large manufacturers, the large systems, they want people to be certified. And so there's a lot of opportunity. That's where the most opportunity in the industry is going to come from, is the large processors or the large manufacturers and the large systems. And so they require certification. There's no two ways around it. So that may be something that you consider.
Absolutely.
The other, and I'm watching the clock here, the other thing is that, just having access to the latest technology increases productivity. It helps ensure certification. It helps auditing, just things like being able to have end-to-end traceability. And from the time I touch it until the time it goes out my door, I can track every single step and be able to report on it. Being able to find it anytime, having access to built-in reporting, access to how am I doing with integrated financials and that kind of thing is important. It's very important. So having access to latest technologies, and it's the bigger companies that have access to this. So one of the things that we're doing, and honestly, we're not great at this. We're working on it. Is how do we make great technology accessible to everybody? So that's on our plate. As I mentioned, we're not great at it, but that's something definitely that we're working on, because it's, for our product, a typical path for companies is that they're on spreadsheets, they're on QuickBooks and that kind of thing, or individual point systems. They grow, they get to a point where they kind of get locked with the spreadsheet, and so they move to like a Maycore or a Razor. And those are great products up to a point. And once they grow to a point, they kind of find themselves in a version lock, or they're not getting the technology, the updates that they need, or it's not as flexible as they need. And that's when they move to us. So companies that are on our platform are, the larger companies. And we would really like to figure out how to move down market and make sure that everybody has access to it so that they can grow quickly and we can support the industry.
Well, I think we've got some, we had some initial conversation about that here a little bit ago. I think we can work on something for these Terra folks and get them access to this great tech.
We would love to do that. Okay, so are you ready? So you're not ready if you're heavily relying on spreadsheets. If you can't have a system that has end-to-end traceability without having to go back and forth through a spreadsheet or retype something. If you don't have financial visibility, if you're not getting updates, if you don't have access to be able to do immediate queries or immediate searches, or get reports built that you build instead of having to go to a developer. If you don't have access to that, you know how fast information moves. You're not ready with your technology. And I'm going to probably end with this one because I think we've about hit our time. So this is an evaluation that we do. I'm happy to share it with anybody, or I'm happy to walk you through it. We can get on the phone. We can talk and figure out, where are you at on the process or on the curve. So this basically says by business process, selling and order management, invoicing, collections. We kind of evaluate what are the things that you're doing today and where do you want to be. So this is kind of an aspirational or transformative evaluation where we can say, hey, we are somewhere between basic and foundational because we're doing these processes. We like to be somewhere between competitive and best in class. Now, how do I do that? And that's where we can come and help with that. So I'm happy to visit with anybody that wants to go through this kind of information just to see if you're ready for the growth, if you're kind of ready for the next step and ready for where the industry's going. And with that, I am going to blow through all these screens because you don't need to see NetSuite stuff unless you want to talk, and just say thank you. So guys, we appreciate the time. Stephen, I appreciate the questions that came from the chat, and you relaying those. If you'd like to contact me, I've got my email address here that goes straight to me. If you want to see the documentary, it's free. You can just scan the QR code, or we can send this to you and send you a link. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time today. And Stephen, I'll hand it back to you.
All right, Chris. Well, thank you very much. That was really informative. A lot of those details and some of those resources for websites that you provided to find some of this information is invaluable. So very much appreciate you, putting all that together for us and wrapping it up very quickly because we try to be as close to 45 minutes as possible. And before I let everybody go, just a couple things I wanted to make mention of. One is I noticed, we talked a little bit about consolidation and people moving around and those sorts of things. I noticed that one of our attendees in listen only mode is somebody who switched positions. I just wanted to say congratulations to them in front of everybody. Patrick O'Hara, who is with FPD Recycling, which is our other exclusive allied member, has now been asked to become the CEO of Kusakowski, one of our certified recycler members. So congratulations to him on that move. Looking forward to working with him in a new capacity. And then I also wanted to, before we go, just real quickly ask if there's anybody that's on this call right now that would like to be part of this marketing discussion, marketing committee that we're putting together for next week, beginning of July. If you could just either send me an email at snapoli@jointerra.org, communicate with us in some manner, or put something in real quickly into the questions or into the chat feature. We'll get in contact with you to make sure that you got all those details in advance, but we will be sending some information about that event here very shortly. But if there's anybody specifically out there right now wants to raise their hand, please do and contact me. So next month, we're actually going to be doing this Terra Third Thursday, the second Thursday. And we already mentioned FPD Recycling. I just mentioned them. They're going to be our host again next month, talking about their technology. So mark your calendars now for that. I believe that's the 14th of July, will we be doing our next session. So until then, y'all take care of yourselves, and we'll talk soon. Goodbye, everybody.